Welcome everyone to this Gifts of God program, Sunday Talk. And I was inspired this week to discuss the atonement. And mainly because I was telling everyone we're working on this book, Sandra's new book, Revolutionary Spiritual Healing. And that's the last chapter, is the final remedy, the atonement. And so what is this remedy that's emphasized so much in the Course in Miracles? And there's even a lesson 139, I will accept the atonement for myself. So I went back and I reread that lesson, because mostly this last chapter on the atonement, Sandra wrote it, and her style of writing is a little different than mine. So what she did was, you can go in this online, A Course in Miracles. You all should know about it. And there's a search bar, and you just put in the atonement, and then it'll show you every place in the Course in Miracles that mentions the atonement. It's like a wonderful, you don't even need what's called a concordance, because you can use that search bar and it'll find any word or any phrase. If you know the phrase that's pretty accurate, it'll look that up and find it and tell you where it is in the Course. So Sandra put in atonement, and then she gets like 50 of these quotes from the Course talking about the atonement. And then she put that in the last chapter. So I'm going, and usually she doesn't write down where they came from. So I've got to go back and look up and put in the chapter and the section and which paragraph and all that, because, to refer to something like that, it's good to know where it came from in the Course. So I've been doing that work. But in the meantime, I'm reading all these things about the atonement. And what is it? It's related to the forgiveness, but it's even more great than forgiveness. It's kind of like the final stage of where forgiveness is going to lead us, right? So the atonement is not, it's not incremental parts. It's not like, oh, well, you do this, and then you do this, and you add this, and you add this, and you add this. Now, your forgiveness may be many different situations, different people. Functionally, we may have a lot of different things that we have to address forgiveness with. But when it comes to the atonement, it's like the final stage in your forgiveness where you forgive everything. And there are certain prayers in the Course that refer to when my forgiveness is complete. It uses the word complete forgiveness. Well, complete forgiveness, if and when, and we're with it enough to arrive there, that is the atonement. It's like the final step where we say, it's like everything is forgiven in ourself, in everyone else. We don't have the grievances. So it's an absolute state. It's like forgiveness leads you there, and the forgiveness may be your individual encounters in your life that have gone off, that we need to set right, or rebalance, or bring a different energy. Those individual experiences will be very specific, but the atonement is when you've done enough of that and you've forgiven enough to know everyone you have some kind of forgiveness process with, right? And you just blanket apply forgiveness to everything, and then you get closer to your forgiveness being complete, which means you are accepting the atonement. Now, the other thing it says, because it often talks about a teacher of God or a miracle worker, and we as students of the Course in Miracles, yes, there's a point where we're serious enough that we could say, well, yes, we are teachers of God. We are among the ministers of God. And we've given the Course enough attention that we can say that. It's not a fleeting interest in our life. It's a major spiritual practice. So being this teacher of God or this miracle worker, and I think all of us who are involved with breath work are also in that category, it says your sole responsibility as a teacher of God is to accept the atonement for yourself. So that has a very deep implication, that statement. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker or the teacher of God is to accept the atonement for himself. So what it does is it leaves you start to see that all these people that you think you need to forgive, who are quote unquote out there, they're not really out there. They're in here. So your accepting of the atonement for yourself is forgiving yourself for all those things you think they did. The external doesn't then exist in the atonement. It's totally internal. And you see that anyone that's in your energy field who activates you or plugs you in or gives you something to react to is just a mirror of something that's going on in yourself that maybe you haven't quite looked at, and they're just showing you that. And so then ultimately it's a forgiveness of yourself. And when you see it that way, then it becomes closer to the atonement, because then you see, well, everything in my life is showing me a mirror of myself, all my experiences. So however I'm feeling in the moment, however I'm reacting in the moment, is my opportunity to forgive myself. And then that statement becomes true. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. So all forgiveness then becomes self-forgiveness. All things that you think are happening out there are actually happening inside you. And that's where you're cleaning it up. That's where you're applying the forgiveness. That's where you're doing the work, the inner work, right? So this was one thing that I began to see when I'm looking into all these quotes about atonement. So I was, checking all of Sandra's quotations and going and finding them and rereading them in the context of where they were quoted. And that's kind of what I got, was that, yes, when you add up all these incidents of forgiveness, and when it gets to the point where you see, oh, this is a way of life, and I want everything to be forgiven, then forgiveness, it's a total correction. It's a total action. Then it's close to the atonement. That's what the atonement is. It's a total action. It's almost like, and it says there aren't any degrees to it. Like you can't be half atoned. You see what I mean? It's like you can't be partial in atonement. It either is or it isn't. You've either accepted it fully or you haven't. There's no gray zone. There's no steps. But you do reach a kind of a critical mass. It's like when you've dedicated your life enough to this work and you see that, well, forgiveness is the key to happiness. Forgiveness offers everything I want. And forgiveness is the work that I do. Forgiveness is my function as the light of the world, it says, right? As the light of the world, forgiveness is my function. So forgiveness becomes the main one of the main spiritual practices. So when you get that, And then you say, well, I want my forgiveness to be complete. I want to take it as far as I can take it. And there's no stone unturned, like, okay, you're all very well versed in my case. I have this thing with my sister, and there was a breakdown, and there's still a breakdown. So that's one of my major lessons in life. How do I see that? How do I heal that in myself? How do I honor her wishes? But at the same time, I work through that in myself, and that's my process. And that's partly where I need my forgiveness to be complete. Let my forgiveness be complete, and let the memory of God return to me. So we can't have the memory of God and have grievances and attack thoughts and all that stuff. They don't coexist in the same mind. So the atonement becomes very important. And this forgiveness being complete becomes very important, because these higher states of consciousness, of awareness, can't even come into us until we've accepted the atonement, or got close enough to it that we see, oh yeah, that's the issue. That's the issue. There's where the block is, and I'm going to deal with the block. So the last couple of weeks, I had a little breakthrough with my sister. I know it sounds a little bit silly, but I found this photograph of her and me. She's about 5 years old. I'm about 3 years old. We're in the backyard of my grandparents, right, with the cherry tree, and we just built a snowman. So there's this snowman in the middle, and my sister very proud on one side, and I'm very proud on the other side. And here we are together in harmony. We just built this snowman, and we're so happy. And we're in this, little snow scene with the cherry tree and the snowman, and he's got his carrot nose. It's such a delightful picture. Well, what I did was, I have a closet in Sandra's. It's our guest room, but it's also Sandra's study, our guest room study, and then my closet with all my clothes is in there. So I opened the door up and I put that picture inside. So every time I go to put my pajamas on, I have to look at it. Every time I get up in the morning, I put my clothes on. I have to get the clothes out. I have to look at it. So I put it in there, and I put a little mala around it. I have a mala from Harikon, and I put that around there. So I've got her surrounded and me surrounded with this Om Namah Shivaya. I don't know how many thousands of Om Namah Shivayas I've said on that mala, but anyhow, this is totally surrounded. So every evening I send her my blessings. I even touch her heart, and I touch my heart, and I send her blessings. And every morning I do the same. So I feel that's really making a difference. It's really helping me let go of whatever dynamics we had in this lifetime. We never quite ever saw things the same way, ever, even growing up as children. And I was always kind of pushing the edge of the envelope and trying to get out of conventions. And she was always trying to fit within conventions and be the good girl, and the girl that mom and dad really loved. And I was the one always pressing it and going out there, and they were freaking out. And, so anyhow, it's been a healing. And I feel like this atonement, she is so much a part of my atonement. Like, it can't even happen if that healing in myself doesn't happen with her. So this is like one of my major things in life. And I think we all have those relationships. All of us have had these troubled, difficult relationships, mostly we start out with a family member or maybe a partner, and oddly enough, I don't have like my my ex-wife, I don't have so much charge at all. And I don't think she has so much charge around me. So I feel that that's been healed quite a lot. But this thing with my sister was I think my hardest relationship in life. And so that's where I'm putting my attention. That's where I'm working on it now. And so I think that was something that I saw when I was editing this part about the atonement, and okay, what can I do? How can I approach this? And so I think I've found a happy balance, or a way to include that. And time will tell. Maybe at some point I'll feel like sending flowers, or I don't know something. I don't know, but it's moving and it's healing, and I feel really good about that. So I think we're all going to be pressed to find those. I mean, we don't have to look very hard, do we? I mean, there's going to be some upsetting relationships in our life, and those very ones are the ones where we need to put this attention on the atonement. And obviously they're there. God has given us these lessons to learn. All things are lessons God would have me learn. Well, what's the lesson? The lesson is the atonement. The lesson is forgiveness. The lesson is letting go. The lesson is seeing your innocence, even in the midst of all of this conflict, and seeing their innocence as well. We're kind of blundering through life, not in our right minds, and not even using our higher self to navigate, and then here's the Course in Miracles comes along and says, well, you're insane, and your real mind is the Christ mind. And if you're not using that, then you're insane. And well, okay, that's 99.999% of the people in the world are insane, right? And so don't beat yourself up that you've kind of fell into that trap, because everybody else is there too. Everybody else is operating out of their ego as well. So don't feel too bad about it. But then you have these moments of clarity that the Course in Miracles gives us, where we can step outside of that for maybe just 5 seconds and have this, rejoicing that we're not trapped. And so I think that's what the atonement offers. I went back and read that lesson this morning, 139, I will accept atonement for myself. It's very interesting, how it starts out. Because what it says when it's talking about atonement, it says the main thing in the process of atonement is you forgot who you were. It's like you thought you were somebody else, or you didn't know who you were, and you were questioning, well, who am I? And then it says, well, even that state where you don't know who you are, it's so separated, like that it would need the atonement to correct it. It's such a big mistake. And then it says, well, there's nothing in the universe that doesn't know what it is. Like if you think about it, an apple tree, an apple tree produces apples, but it doesn't like come into being questioning its identity. We're like the only thing in the universe that questions who we are and has forgotten who we are. So this atonement is necessary to restore to our awareness our true identity. And then that's the main function of the atonement. We forgot who we were. We made this self, this false self called the ego, that's full of conflict, full of problems, full of effort, full of struggle, all that. We made a self that embodies that and forgot that we were created in this heavenly state of pure bliss. When I met Tara Singh, he had such a background in the traditions of the East, right? And he was well versed in a lot of the scriptures from the East. And he was talking about the different yugas, time periods. In the East, these yugas are very long. They're like 25,000 years long, right? And mankind has evolved over a very long period. Like our history goes back maybe 5,000 years, 10,000 years. Well, their history goes back like 50,000 years, 100,000 years, these different yugas. They're so vast, right? So he's talking about these yugas. And right now we're in the Kali Yuga, which is the dark age. And then he says, well, there was a yuga called the Sat Yuga, which Sat means true. It's like the time when humans knew who they were, right? So they incarnated on the planet, and they were they had bodies, but they were also kind of lit. They were light beings. They were kind of between the non-physical and the physical. They had a body, but they were also clear of their source, and they were clear that they were light. That was their main composition. And then their function on the planet was to bring peace and joy, to bring blessing, to bring harmony, to bring beauty, to bring divine awareness. And they were clear that was why they were on the planet, right? So gradually, as we evolved, or you could say we devolved, we didn't evolve, we kind of devolved, we fell more into the grossness of matter, where we identified more with the body than we did with the light or the spirit. So, and this gradual fall or decline took thousands and thousands of years. All right. So we weren't even aware that we were losing our connection to the light or our awareness of the light. So we fell into kind of a sleep, a kind of an amnesia, and we forgot that we were spirit. We forgot that we were light. And then we started identifying with bodies, and then fear comes in, guilt comes in, anger comes in, so all those impurities start to come in. And basically, we forgot who we are. And that's what this lesson, I Will Accept the Atonement, was talking about in a much more simple way than I just explained it. But it was saying that the principal purpose of the atonement is to remember our identity, remember who we are as God created us. And that can happen like that, it's not incremental. Now, like there may be like, oh yes, I have to forgive my sister. Oh, I had to forgive my parents. I had to forgive my ex-wife. I may have had all those individual experiences in my life where forgiveness was the theme, but you add all those up, and then you see that your function is to forgive, and it's one of your main spiritual practices, right? So you've come that far that you see, oh, well, almost every relationship I have involves some kind of forgiveness. So that becomes your sadhana, so to speak, one of your main spiritual practices. So you've got that far. So forgiveness is it. But now this last step is you're willing to apply it to everything. And then that's the atonement. The atonement is the correction of all your wrong thinking. It's the correction of all your misperception. And it's the remembrance of who you are. Okay, so this is a very important point. around the atonement. And I think if we all get this, like we're gonna take a huge leap. Like it's not gonna take long. We're all gonna get it. And next week when we show up, we're gonna be different, right? Because we got this point. So you are as God created you. That's a lesson Jesus repeats 3 times. I am as God created me. It's like 93, 110, and 162, right? So why would he say that 3 times? I am as God created me. Well, that is key to the atonement. It's like we have to see that the ego is not real, even though we've been preoccupied with it. Now that's hard because we've had a whole history where we've had things with our ego that we've had to deal with. And it's our history. It's in our memory bank. And all the traumas, all the upsets, all that is stored in there. And then that becomes part of our identity. But now the atonement says that part of you that was going through all that trauma, that's not even you. That's not even you. Forget it. There's nothing to forgive because your real self didn't go through the trauma. Now, in that instant, you shifted out of the self you thought you were, who didn't know who you were, into the self you are, who knows who you are and never had to even question it. You become the apple tree that knows it's an apple tree that bears fruit. You become the light being sent to this planet Earth to bring peace and joy, and that's your only function. And you've forgiven everything and everyone, which would have been from your ego anyway. You've gone through all that. You've looked at it all. You've looked at every relationship from all your perspective, and you've said, okay, I surrender. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I totally forgive myself. I totally forgive everyone. And it was just a bad dream. And in my reality, it never happened. Well, when you get to that point, you are ready for the atonement. It's like stepping through a door. You know, when you're on this side of the room, you're not in the room. When you go through the door, now you're in a totally different place. It's that simple. And that's what the atonement is. The atonement is the door you go through where you don't have anything to forgive anymore because you've forgiven everything. This is very profound. And, I'm getting it as I'm talking to you now. I'm getting how profound it is. It's not it doesn't take time. We think, oh, I got a lot to forgive and I got to forgive so-and-so. And then I've got to clean this up over here and I got to go over here and forgive her for that. And then it takes time. But this thing about atonement, it doesn't take time. It's like you go through the door or you don't go through the door. And then once you go through the door, you wake up rejoicing, It's like, it's that simple. And this, I think we must all be ready for this, or it wouldn't be coming to Sandra and me so strongly. In this whole chapter, we wrote this whole book, right? We spent 1.5 years writing this book. And then Sandra says, yes, but we need the final chapter has to be about the atonement. Where did that come from? I don't know. We weren't even thinking about it. But then all of a sudden it becomes clear, yes, that's the revolutionary spiritual healing. That is it. Accepting the atonement for ourselves. And that's where the healing has to happen. And furthermore, when we read some things in the teacher's manual, it made it even more clear. This is like how our healing and the atonement related, right? This is from the teacher's manual. I'm not making this up. And so now we're thinking, revolutionary spiritual healing. Okay, what is so revolutionary about it? Okay, well, then it's got to include the atonement. So that's the last chapter. Now, just get this, what it says in the first line. Healing and atonement are not related. They are identical. They are identical. Healing is the atonement. Atonement is the healing. So you can't have spiritual healing without the atonement. You just can't, because they're the same thing. You can't be healed until you've forgiven everything. Why? Because sickness and guilt go together. You cannot have sickness without guilt. Guilt is underlying all disease. Guilt, fear, anger, they're all, that complex of guilt, fear, and anger that's underlying every physical ailment, every mental ailment, every physical ailment you have in your life. So without the atonement, you can't heal. Even death. You can heal death even with the atonement. You would have to. I mean, why would Jesus say there is no death? The Son of God is free. He says that in 163, right? There is no death. The Son of God is free. Well, you're free when you accept the atonement and you embrace your total innocence. And there's nothing. Then at that point, when you step through that door into the atonement, you see, oh, all the things I thought I had to forgive and atone for never even happened in my true self. That was only my ego self that was engaged in all those dramas, right? So, but since I'm not my ego, those things never really happened in the level of my true self. So at the level of my true self, there's nothing to forgive because they didn't happen at that level. But now you're only going to relate in that level. You're going to relate to yourself. You're going to love yourself in that vibration. And that's what you're going to extend to others in your life. You're going to relate to them, not as their egos that made all these mistakes that need forgiveness, but as their true self, where it's easy for you to overlook their mistakes and help them overlook their mistakes. So we're getting closer to it, I think. And yeah. Now, what I've just said may sink in, may not, because Tara Singh said there was something that we all had to deal with, and I've certainly witnessed it in myself. And he said there's inherent in everyone is unwillingness. Like we're so addicted to the struggle, we're so addicted to the ego's thought system, we're so addicted to death even. Sandra recently came up with that statement that death is an addiction. We're so addicted to that, we have what he would call unwillingness. Even if we're shown the truth, even if we're shown the door to go through, we don't want to do it. We don't want to go through the door. We think we're going to have to sacrifice everything to do that. And all we're giving up is our illusion of ourself, but our ego doesn't think that. Our ego thinks, well, we're giving up all the things that are near and dear to us. So we have this resistance. And then he called that unwillingness. And so we're all going to have to face that at some point, the unwillingness. I think we can face it together. I think it's much easier to face it together like we're doing, We're having dialogue, we're having meeting each other on a daily basis or weekly basis, and we're seriously looking at this thing called the Course in Miracles, and we all want to bring it into application. We don't want to just be, college students. We want to be people that have been transformed by it. It has to be possible. I mean, Jesus wouldn't have brought it in if it weren't possible for some people to wake up. And we have it in our midst, and we can use it to wake up. But we have to see it clearly, and we have to get it really deeply. And I think we're all doing that, or we wouldn't be here. So this thing about the atonement, it's making sense to me. Oh, the other thing that we're looking at is convincing people, or at least presenting it clear enough in this book, that they see that sickness is of the mind, it's not of the body. And this is a big deal, because people think that sickness just happens to them. They think the body just gets these things, and they don't make the connection. Now, one reason, and this was explained to me best by my Ho'oponopono teacher, who was a PhD psychologist, right? He was a PhD psychologist who had worked in prisons with criminally insane people. So, I mean, he was a serious doctor, right? And then when he got to Ho'oponopono, he totally shifted in his methodology, where he only used Ho'oponopono with them. And he cleared up this whole ward that had all these criminally insane people. And within a year or so, these people got better, to the point where they shut the hospital down because there weren't any more patients in the hospital, right? And he cleared it all up using Ho'oponopono. Well, he said something once that really struck me. Now, and this had to deal with the subconscious mind. And this is what most people aren't in touch with. And this is also what we try to get people in touch with through the breath work. And he was talking about the vastness of the subconscious compared to what we're conscious of. Right? We think we're directing our life through our conscious decisions and our conscious thoughts. And we even talk about that, becoming more conscious. Well, he said scientific research showed that every second, the mind is processing something like 11 million bits of information. Our mind is processing 11 million bits of information in 1 second. He said, at most, the conscious mind is aware of 7 or 8 of those bits in 1 second, at most. So this is how proportionally huge the subconscious mind is compared to the conscious mind. So, all right, now put that on the shelf. Now, if we're trying to teach people that all physical symptoms or all physical disease comes from the mind, that would totally make sense, because those 10,900,992 bits of data are firing off, and within all of that is the cause of your physical symptom, some negative thought, some negative memory, some negative something that's refiring and producing an ailment and eventually producing death. Well, it makes sense. So what we're doing in this work, and even with the atonement, we're saying to our mind, okay, there's all this stuff going on I'm not even aware of. And it's huge. It's my subconscious mind. And in Hawaiian, they would call that your child. That would be the child part of your being, your subconscious mind. and that your mother, who's your conscious part, has to embrace that child. And that's where the forgiveness has to take place, mostly, because your child is holding all these memories of death, disease, problems, blah, 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 right? It's your ego too. It's your ego is holding all this, but it's the ego we need to forgive. It's the ego we need to take care of and embrace and forgive. So the conscious mind, the only purpose of it is to forgive the subconscious mind. And now with the atonement, you're saying, okay, I want to do that all in one action. You know, like the separation, when it says, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. And then it says there's only one problem, and that's separation. And it's like, apply that to this situation. You have this subconscious mind with all these memories, all these thoughts, and not all of them are good. And some of them are negative, producing negative results. Now, how do you clean that up? Like instantly, because that's what the atonement's trying to do. It's trying to say, I don't even have to know all the individual thoughts in my subconscious that are going to produce painful results. I don't even have to know. All I have to know is that's where the problem is, and that's where I'm going to forgive myself. And then your conscious action to accept the atonement, it kind of blankets the whole thing. You don't have to go through the 11 million thoughts and find which ones are the ones screwing you up. You just say, somewhere in that is the cause of my problems, and I'm going to forgive the whole thing. I'm going to forgive the fact that I have so many unconscious thoughts in the first place, and just blanket the whole thing with this atonement. And then see how you feel, you know? And then when things happen, when crap comes up, you say, oh, well, that was my personal I acting up. That was something from some memory I had with that person from this time in my life. With my sister, it's like, yeah, we fought even when we were kids, and now we haven't really progressed at all. You know, we disagreed when we were kids, and now we're really disagreeing. So it's like you can forgive all that. It's all held in your subconscious memory, but you just have to say, okay, I couldn't help it. It was just my thoughts playing out, and I'm innocent. They're innocent. We're all innocent. Something like that. And then you're getting closer to accepting this atonement, because atonement is, you know, if you break down the word, some people say at one meant. Atonement is a oneness. It's a wholeness. It's like, even like, let's just take your own mind. And we see, okay, it has these different levels, spirit, which is in the state of grace, and that's your highest reality. Then it has your consciousness, your conscious part, and you're only aware of very small bit of your whole being, right? And then it's got this subconscious part, which is huge. It goes back all your lifetimes from when you were an amoeba, you know, and all the memory of all that is in there. And now that's what we're trying to like forgive and clean up and apply the atonement to. Well, when you see it in that whole way, the atonement makes perfect sense. It's like you don't have to go correct every individual little screw up that you ever did from time immemorial. You just say, okay, using this system that I was using, the ego's thought system, it was bound to fail. It was bound to have pain and suffering. It's just no other way. It had to produce that, because that's what was stored in the memory bank. It's like if you have a computer with a virus in it, it's gonna reproduce that virus, right? Until you clean it up. And the way we're cleaning up the system is through forgiveness and the atonement. We're just saying, okay, the whole thing from the yuga when I was a light being and I knew it, and then I went through 50,000 years and I forgot who I was as God created me. I forgot that I was light. I'm cleaning up 50,000 years of memory in one instant by accepting the atonement for myself. And then there's the grace right there. That's super grace. That's like grace on steroids, you know. I'm free, I'm released. By grace I live, by grace I will release, by grace I give, by grace I am released. So you let yourself off the hook, but you're letting everybody else off the hook too, because you see the dilemma. They're just stuck in their subconscious mind. And it's producing all these ill effects. So this is one of the main things we're trying to get people to see in revolutionary spiritual healing, that the mind is what needs to be healed, not the body. The body's just a printout of what's going on inside your mind. And so it's kind of a huge task, but we're getting better at explaining it. So I think we're getting better that this book is really going to get the point across to people, and they're going to start taking responsibility for their inner life. And they see that their inner life is what's giving them their physical life, and they clean it up from the inside out. And that's what we're all doing here. As students of the Course in Miracles, it's an inside job. We're doing the healing from the inside out. And that's the right approach. That's the right approach. You know, I mean, not to say if you need a doctor, you broke your arm, you need to go have a doctor put your arm back together, right? That happened to Sandra. She fell and broke her shoulder, and we needed a surgeon to do that. And they're there for their function. But we're here for this other function. We're here because, you know, we're students of the Course in Miracles, and we see that things begin in the mind, even accidents. You know, there aren't any accidents. So even if you break your arm, what were the thoughts just before you fell and broke your arm? You know, there was probably something where you forgot something, or you went out of your body, or you had a moment of something where you weren't in your right mind, and then you had an accident because you attracted that. So even that is a mental source for it. Well, okay, I want to just talk. I need your help, and I don't want to make a big deal about this, but this thing with my sister was my family, right? And it was something that I'd been working through for a very long time. And usually when I would go to deal with those things with my family, I would go alone. But this last time when my brother-in-law passed and we were going out to support my sister, Sandra went with me. And then normally she was kind of spared of some of these dynamics, you know, but because she went with me, she was like right there with me, experiencing everything. And then when my sister told us to leave the house, I was kind of half expecting it, you know, it wasn't a surprise to me. She'd done that to me before, so it was not a new thing. And I was kind of already braced for the shock. But for Sandra, that was a huge shock. That had never probably even happened ever in her life, by a family member telling her to leave their house. So it traumatized her more than it did me. And I think she's still working through this. And we need your prayers that she can get through this, because it was a big hit and she's still processing it. And it was 8 months ago. So I need your help. Just please send us light that we can get through this, and that Sandra can get back on her track and She's going to do this thing on her birthday, this Divine Mother training for one day, free. And I think it'll be really powerful. But between now and then, please send her your light, your healing energy, that she can get back on track to her real self and put this thing with my sister behind, because it's really affected her more so than it affected me, because I'd been dealing with it my whole lifetime, with my sister. But with her, it was a totally new thing, and it was a totally shocking thing. So I think she has a little bit of PTSD still from this, which, by the way, we wrote a chapter in the book about how to heal PTSD, because a lot of people are walking around with major stuff that they went through, and they're obsessed with it. That's what it is. Post-traumatic stress syndrome. A syndrome is something that you're just kind of stuck in, right? So I think she's a little stuck in this experience, and I need your help to just please send us light that we can get through this. And I know how to deal with it. I'm not making it real, and I'm there for her and all that. So I think I'm handling it pretty well, but I need your support in getting through this. And I know we can, but thank you. Thanks. I know you'll pray for us. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any questions? This was really good. I was on a roll about atonement. How did I talk for an hour and almost an hour on one subject? I don't know. Yes, Rasa, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just want to say this was a very deep talk.
Yeah.
And I think, the fact that you spent time working on the book, I mean, it's just bubbling up. The truth is just bubbling up, and we get it.
Okay.
Well, I get it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the other night, and Barbara and I are very close, when we're doing a book, Barbara and I are synced. We're synchronized. And I don't know, I was up in the middle of the night, and I knew there needed to be one more something in the front that was going to set the stage for people to enter this thing, right? And I wrote this introduction, and it was so clear. And that's what I read yesterday. And there's I made a YouTube video of me reading this, and I listened to it a couple times myself, and I said, wow, that was so clear. Where did that come from? And so I'm so glad I put it in, and it really it'll get people in the vibe to receive what's in the rest of the book. But even Barbara said, wow, that was pretty good. You did pretty good on that one. Just a few, punctuations here and there. So I know I'm in this groove. I'm with it, and it's happening. And maybe because you guys are part of that, you show up and I have to show up. All right. So when I have to show up, I have to say something. And what's coming out of me, it's like that lesson. The Holy Spirit looks through me today. The Holy Spirit speaks through me today. Then there's another lesson. The Word of God has given me to speak. Well, when are we going to get to that point? When what comes out of us is the Holy Spirit speaking, or what comes out of us is the Word of God given us to speak. How long are we going to go on in our meaningless life before we get that? We all have to ask that question. And I think when we're closer to really wanting we have the desire that we really want that to be our truth. We don't want to engage in meaningless blah, blah, blah anymore. We want to say something that's going to touch people's heart and come from our heart to their heart, and something happens. And that's why we're here. And we're getting all closer to that as students of the course. We're all getting closer to that. Our words are becoming more poignant, purposeful, Our interactions are becoming more purposeful, and they're uplifting to the people around us, and it's a happier life. You know, God's will for us is perfect happiness. Well, when we share those divine things, that makes us ultimately happy. So that's what's happening in me. It's not a big deal, but I'm noticing it's awakening. And maybe this thing with my sister, I had to go through it. It was my last piece of the atonement. I had to go through it. It was the biggest one. And now I see, gosh, I'm sending her my blessings twice a day. Put on my PJs. Yes, blessings. Put on my clothes in the morning. Blessings. It's wonderful. So whether she's getting them, I just have to trust Jesus is delivering it. Please, Jesus, deliver this in whatever form she can receive. So yeah, thank you, Rasa. I really feel like we're all coming into that. Like you know, a teacher shows up, well, and we all have that teacher within us, right? So the teacher within us shows up when we're willing to have those relationships that we're there to affect. Like Tara Singh was ready to be the teacher, and all the years he spent being groomed for that by Krishnamurti, 30 years, and then with Dr. Shukman, one-on-one every day for like 4 years or 3 years. Every day, can you imagine? Every day, same time, she's grooming him to share the course. And then when he's there, the students show up, the people show up. And that's what it'll be like with us. The people will show up, and they will be the people we're to reach. And that'll be effortless. We don't have to worry about it. It'll just happen. So we don't have to seek it. It'll just happen. So anyhow, well, God bless you all. Look, I'm pretty good about getting these up on the YouTube, so I'll send you all the link, and you can listen again if you want. I think it was very deep, and I think we're all ready for this atonement. We're all ready for it. And it literally, I know it in my bones. It's going to be like going through the door. It's that swift. You're ready. You see it. You go through the door. You're there. It won't be like anything you ever felt before. And we'll all feel it together because we're all going through the door together. You know that saying, no one is crucified alone, and no one enters heaven by themselves. So profound. No one enters heaven by themselves. So that would be the atonement. The atonement is the door to heaven, and we're all going through it together. And that's the only way we can go through it, is together. Can't go through it alone. You have to go together. Bring your brothers with you. Bole Baba Ki Jai. God bless you all. I really love you so much. Really. I look forward to these every week. You can't imagine. All right. Have a good day. Be kind. Be gentle with yourself. You're all doing great.